Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of American Grit with myself, Tim Jensen. I've got a very great guest today. His name is George Lutz. You may have heard of his organization, Honor and Remember. You might have even seen his flag across the country in unique spots, celebrating the fallen lives of Americans' heroes. And today we're going to talk a little bit about his program, why he put it all together, what is he still doing today, 17, 18 years later, and the work that continues to happen great across the United States here with honorandremember.org. So I want to introduce George Lutz to the program. Thank you, sir. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Tim. Thanks. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate it. Heard so much of, as we all have, of grunt style, over the years, and finally, standing in the place where it all started. But I'm very impressed by what you guys are doing. But thank you for the opportunity to share Honor and Remember. I mean, this is a passion. You'll find out as we're talking that you realize that it's not what I do, it's who I am, right? This very thing that I'm doing, is a part of my DNA at this point. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what I wanted to do something special first, just to kind of, set up a moment for us, is that in 2010, right after I started the organization, I decided that I needed to deploy myself to America. I needed to get out there and talk to everybody I could about the flag, about why it was important, about why they should embrace it. And so I literally got in an RV, because my dream was get in a wrapped RV like the politicians and drive across America, right? Yeah. So I got in an RV, I drove across through all 48 states, did go to Alaska and Hawaii. And we could talk about that trip later if we need to. But setting up this moment is that for 6 months I was gone, visited every state capital, visited every veteran Gold Star family that I could find. And I ended up in Arlington Cemetery on Veterans Day of 2010. 300 people were there to meet me, that I'd met across the country. And one of the things we did to honor those fallen there in Section 60 was to place at grave, every single grave, we placed an American flag and an Honor and Remember flag. Over 16,000 flags were placed in graves that day when I ended that 6-month tour. I had made a deal with the director of Arlington Cemetery that I would not leave those flags at gravesite, because you know what happens at Arlington, right? Things where they get trashed, and then they end up throwing it away. So the cemetery doesn't like stuff being left there for very long. So I promised him that we would clear out all those flags. The next day, I and a handful, right? I had 300 people putting them down. I and a handful of supporters picked up every one of those flags, right? And so I brought with me today a set of flags that was placed in Arlington Cemetery in 2010 and Section 60 in honor of every one of our fallen men and women from the War on Terror and past, right? So you will find, I leave this with you as a token of, our relationship, but it still carries the dirt of Arlington Cemetery from 12 years ago. And I want to leave that with you. Wow. Here today. So
George, I am. That's incredible. The work that you do, the passion that is behind it, that we're all going to learn about here in the following program. It really means a lot, and from our organization, thank you. This is very special.
Thank you. I really wanted you to have that. But let me tell you a little bit about Honor and Remember.
Please.
So in December of 2005. I, like so many families, got that knock at the door, right? 2 uniformed soldiers standing there, very somber, with that, still even difficult today, right? Yeah. With that emotionless expression, right? And you wonder what's going on. I mean, your mind is going in a million places. My first thought was somehow my son's been hurt. Right? Or maybe they're at the wrong door. What's going on here? I ushered them into the living room, and what did lo and behold, 5 very simple words, right? We regret to inform you. Yeah. What do you do with that? I mean, as a dad, what do you do with that information? Right? It's the most devastating, isn't a big enough word to encompass the feeling, of that moment and what my family went through. My mom it was right after Christmas. Yeah. My mom was there, of course, my wife, my family, some of my family were there. I have 5 children, and it's unbelievable, right? You got those 5 stages of grief. And so what happened was you start to plan for, okay, now I'm never going to see him again. I'm never going to hear his voice again. What do you do with that? So what I started to do, not to go through and belabor the process of grieving and getting him buried, but what I started to do was I started to open drawers and look in closets and try to find anything I could that would remind me of him, right? That would give me one more day of life, that I could remember him, right? Back then, this was way early before the internet was in full swing. We had AOL Instant Messenger, remember that? That was our big communication tool. And so I went back and found conversations that I had with him on AOL. I found handwritten letters from boot camp. A man found photographs, but he was married and had 2 children. Yeah. And so he had a life of his own. So I went out to his friends, and I thought, tell me anything you can about him. Let me know how he lived. Give me a story, because I wanted to hold on to one more thing. Yeah. Yeah. And then there was a finite universe for that, right? My son was very gregarious and very friendly, but still you can only reach so many people. Yeah. And then I realized, well, he served, right? He was in the Army, he was in PSYOPs, he loved what he was doing. And so I reached out to that community, right? What do you know about him? How did he do his job? What was he doing? Was he respected? All of that. But he was only in the service for 1.5 years. It was his first deployment, 6 weeks into his first deployment.
It was a tough period, 2005.
It was awful. Of course, he would never admit it, right? We're fine. We get shot at once in a while, but they don't know how to shoot. They're terrible shots. This one was lucky, right? One sniper got him in the right place at the right time. But there became an end to that. And he was in PSYOPs. It was only a 3-man team. It wasn't like he was out there with a battalion of guys that really knew him. And I mentioned to you that earlier that he had served with Marines. Mm-hmm. But they weren't his buddies, you know what I mean? His battle buddies. He was just a part of that network, that deployment. And so I went out and I found everybody I could to hear as many stories. Like, I'm still hearing stories, thank God, 19 years later. But then I did something really funny, that I say funny, odd, that probably I thought everybody was doing, but nobody really was doing. I started attending funerals. I started I live in a military town. There were a lot of funerals. And every time I heard of a service member losing their life, I was there. Why? Because I wanted to let that family know they weren't going through it alone. Yeah. Right? That somebody else was going through it besides them. Now, I'm not military. I wasn't in the military. Didn't have any relations, that were in the military, except before I was born, my dad, my grandfather, my uncle all served in the Navy. But they didn't talk about it, wasn't a part of life. So I never was exposed to anything in the military. And so I was what I would call a typical American, right? I was just this guy who just happened to have a son who joined the Army, who he didn't come back, right? So I started going to these funerals thinking, these families should know somebody else is out there who's grieving, and maybe they want somebody to talk to. Yeah. So for a year, probably 1.5 years, I attended dozens of funerals, and I just met these families, and I just hugged them, and I just gave them my number and said, let's talk. And over the course of that time and going to the funerals over and over again, I realized 2 things: that families didn't want their loved one to have died in vain, and they didn't want them to have been forgotten. Mm-hmm. That was the only two things that I saw repeated itself over and over. And there's a lot of good things happening for families out there. But in the end, the bottom line is, please don't forget, right? And so as part of that, I know I'm long-winded here, but it's all context to the point of, as a Gold Star dad, I would receive, as many of the families did, gifts. Right? People would send letters, they'd send cards, they'd send quilts, they'd send photographs, they'd send portraits. You know, the Marines sent me a portrait of a hand-drawn Michael Reagan portrait, which was beautiful. I filled up the living room with things that people sent. But I'm not a taker. I don't really take well to being offered things. I want to give. And I kept thinking to myself, I want to give. What can I give these families that would make a difference in their lives? And I thought, well, I could just talk about their loved one, or I could, send them something, but nothing made sense to me. And I'm a spiritual guy, and I prayed about this a long time. And I thought, those two things that I mentioned are so important to them. Remembrance. I can't answer the died in vain part, right? I mean, because you can call something a war, you can call it a conflict, you can call it a skirmish. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, your son or daughter, your husband or wife's not coming home, right? So you're going to have to deal with the in vain part. I believe that anyone who serves in the armed forces and gave their life for a free country, no matter how, that life is not in vain.
Right.
So as long as we're still living in a free country, that life is not in vain. Call it what you want. Politicize it however you want. I couldn't do anything about that, but maybe I could do something about the remembrance part. And then I thought, well, I can just remember them this way or that way, but how do I remember everybody? Because I'm sure you've talked to many families, they all have their own way of remembering. There could be a post office named after their loved one. There could be a bridge. There could be a road. There could be an event that they created. There are all these there's 1,000 different ways to remember. But yet those are the families that are more type A, right? They're out there calling attention to their loved one, which they should. But there becomes even an end to that universe, right? Because it takes energy to do that. And how much energy can you really continue for year after year after year? So I thought that wasn't really the right way for me. What I needed to do is figure out a way to remember every single fallen service member, and especially their families, because they're gone, right? It's their families that will be here grieving for the rest of their lives. Yeah. They're the ones we have to touch. They're the ones we have to remind that, you know what, freedom came at a cost, and I know you paid it, and we want to let you know we haven't forgotten. That became my mission. And so while I was attending these funerals, Tim, I saw these flag lines, right? You've seen the Patriot Guard and the American Legion Riders and the other groups that stand out there with their flag line. And I see these lines of American flags, wonderful. This is our geography, right? And then I'd see a POW flag. And then I'd see a branch of service flag. And I thought, is there anything that recognizes the fallen specifically? I mean, that lets us know that this is someone that gave their life? I mean, yes, America, but we all serve in America. We're all Americans, right? So that wasn't it. So I thought what the fallen needed was a flag, a way for all of us to send a message to everyone else, and especially to those families, that they have not been forgotten. And so 2 years later into my grieving process, there's a long process that we may end up talking about, but on Memorial Day of 2008, I unveiled what I hoped would be that national symbol that would give us all an opportunity to be unified to send one message and actually complete a circle of tribute. Our American flag is a symbol that we all stand for, that we recognize as our geography. It's what we fight for. It's what we die for. The POMIA flag, which reminds us that we had those missing, those captured. And then we have a flag that remembers those that gave the ultimate sacrifice and die on this planet for our freedom every single day, in one form or another. And so the Honor and Remember flag was born to become that symbol, now going on 17 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. What a incredible journey that you've been on, right? I'm fascinated, with the beginning parts of that. That period of 2005 to 2007, right, or even leading up to 2008, where you're going and visiting all the families. That's incredible. I think about my friends that didn't come home, and there's a few and the funerals that we've had since, right? That we've been home, and a lot of these guys are taking their lives or dying of cancers,
right?
And I could go to those funerals, and they're nothing like the funerals were during the war, when it was top of mind. People were a little bit more engaged in the process of remembering and honoring. Today, those are not the same cases. Those funerals are smaller, not recognized any longer, and we really talk about the global war and terrorism as much as we do, and that's only 4 years in the rearview mirror.
All right.
Right. I think what we do here at Grunstyle is important through the work that we do of the business, and then through the foundation and the impacts it makes for this community by remembering. Right. Through our moments in time, Memorial Day, we'll read the name of, we shut down our business and we read the names of all those fallen in the GWAT period. We do it again on September 11th. We don't shut down the business, but we take a moment of remembrance. And these are big moments for us. We are a 9/11 brand. If it wasn't for 9/11 itself, this brand probably would never came to existence, right? It changed everybody's life in America. Everybody knows where they were in 2001, if you're over the age of 7 years old, and everybody understands the impacts of what that has done for our country and the security state of position that we find ourselves in today. It's all relative. With all that being said, I go back to thinking of my friends. And I'm sure you think about your son. Is like, what was the last memory you have of your son? I'm sure that flashed through your mind when the gentleman came to your door, and presented the flag and those 5 dreaded words. Yeah,
it's interesting because he was deployed out of Fort Bragg, at that time, now Fort Liberty, and it was Thanksgiving, and he was getting ready to go on his first deployment. So we drove down and helped him pack. I remember being in the driveway with him with his knapsack. I don't know what you call it, knapsack, rucksack, whatever. And he had all of everything he had to put in it laid out in the driveway.
Yeah.
And he said, "Dad, everything has to go in this bag, including my helmet."
Yeah.
And I said, "That ain't happening." And he said, "Well, they've taught me how to do it." And so I just remember him taking the time to actually stuff that bag with everything that he was bringing, on his deployment. And later that day, I'm a photographer by trade, was able to take the last family photos, that we had with him and his wife and 2 kids.
Yeah.
And, incredible
It's
memories.
A beautiful memory, right? One of as a father, you're looking down, it's like, that's never going to happen. And then, 20 minutes later, the whole bag is packed, and defied logic once again, and created another proud moment of a father, right?
I got exposed to Army life a little bit, right?
That's right. That's incredible. Yeah, I have a son that's in the Navy right now, and
nice.
And the thing that I ponder a lot internally and self-reflect on is, he's grown up with really observing his father post-war, right, and some of the things that I've struggled with, and my network of Marines that he's been exposed to all of that, and to see that that in spite of all those things, right, he still has a love of country similar to his father that's willing to join the military and continue carrying the torch of freedom for the next generation, right? So, that's where I get encouraged about these opportunities and these conversations, right there. We all have our memories of our loved ones that are no longer with us, and it creates passion work for us, and that's what I really think is beautiful about what you're doing, right? Is you found that passion. By reaching down deep and saying, I want to know more about the things that are happening with me, that I can help others along their process as well, and most importantly, creating a space of remembrance, right? I think is important. So, what are your thoughts on it?
So we live in an apathetic society.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, take 9/11 that you've mentioned. 9/11 was a horrific time in our country's history. Horrific. On 9/12, you couldn't find an American flag to buy.
Right.
Right? Everybody all of a sudden got instantly patriotic.
Right.
Right? The manufacturers were having hard time even making them. They were 6 months to a year behind in reproducing flags. But 3 months later, not so many flags were up.
Yeah.
6 months later, more were faded and tattered. And I would say a year later, the people that had flags up still were the people that had flags up on 9/10.
Sure. Yeah.
We all went about our lives, right? And this is the same thing that happens with our military that's serving every single day. Most of us don't know what the military are doing. They can't appreciate it. They know the effects of it, obviously, because we're still free, but nobody wants to really, get involved with it. I recently spoke at the National Convention of the Department of Veteran Affairs state directors, okay? This is all 50 states, the heads of each state, Veterans Affairs. I had an opportunity, an honor to speak at their convention. And I polled them, just kind of loosely polled them. And I asked them, if we collected all of the veterans, the active duty, and everyone associated with the military, what percentage of our population would that entail? I said, would it be, we're talking about 1% are active duty. Would it be 5%? Would it be 10%? Would it be 20%? And basically that group came back with, it's about 8%.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right? So if you take 92% of this country who is not involved with the military, not associated with the military, don't understand really the complexities and the intricacies of the military, then that's a population that doesn't understand what sacrifice means, right? And what the death of a service member means to not only the family, but the extended family, their friends, their comrades, and everyone, within that sphere of influence, right? I recognize that when my son came to me, I don't even know if I said his name, Tony. Tony was his name. When Tony came to me and he said, Dad, I joined the Army. He didn't ask my permission. He didn't ask my advice. He said, Dad, I joined the Army and I leave for boot camp on Saturday. And I went, are you crazy? There's a war going on. You could get hurt.
Yeah.
He said, Dad, I've got a certain skill set. I believe the women and children of Iraq, we were in Iraq at that time, need our help. He said, I can make a difference. What can you do when your son comes to you and says that, right? I gave him a hug. I told him I loved him. Told him to keep his head down.
Yeah.
Every parent in America, Tim, every parent in America, including me, would rather somebody else's kid died for their country besides their own. Mm-hmm. There's going to be casualty. You know there's going to be death, but everybody else wants it to be somebody else. It's natural, right? I'm sure even yourself. So I say somebody else's kid is dying so that yours doesn't have to. Mm-hmm. What's the least that you can do? The very least, be thankful. That's all. It's simple. Just be thankful. But how do you do that? How are you thankful? What can you say to me as a grieving dad that makes you thankful that my son gave his life? I didn't do anything. He gave his life. I had nothing to do with it. He made the decision. He went out there. He trained. He served. He was in the wrong place at the right time. But what can we do as Americans to be thankful? Like if you never served and you know your neighbor served and they lost someone, you'd be all over them, right? You'd go, oh my gosh, what can I do for you? What I'm telling you is the honor and remember flag becomes the only way in America, the only way I know of, that everybody can say the same message that is understood by the families who have given that loved one.
Yeah, you make a great point. We've done a great job with the assistance of the post office and the government itself, right? And I think that's what you're trying to do with getting this in front of the right people and spending some time in the Capitol. We'll talk a little bit about that. But with the POW flag, right? That was something that the Vietnam community, the Vietnam veteran community, fought for very, very hard.
18 years.
Very hard, right? And you're coming up on that.
I am. When I started, I said, I don't have 18 years. I knew the history and spoke to some of the folks involved.
Yeah.
And I go, but here I am.
Yeah, right. In spite of all the things, all the troubles and the finances that are incurred to get here.
Yeah.
So tell us, are you following a similar playbook as the POW group that got that flag recognized in the United States? Or how are you going about getting this to be more recognized within the United States? Yeah,
there really wasn't a playbook for them because it was a different time, right? 1971. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't have the amount of exposure that we have access to that now we do, that they didn't have back then. So basically it was a matter of getting it out there and then just putting it everywhere, trying to get it everywhere they could. They made some mistakes, but it took a long time to get to the point where they are. And I applaud that effort because those Vietnam veterans kept at it, right? Year after year, and it was a long, hard battle. And they just recently, last year, did get it flying in all the post offices. And that's wonderful because there are still men, mostly men, that whose remains are missing, right? It'll never be found. But my idea was only to the point of I need to expose this everywhere, a national symbol. I thought I need to go to Congress, right? My very first year in 2008, I had a congresswoman, Thelma Drake, who, at that time put in a bill to make the Honor and Remember flag our national symbol of remembrance. Of course, you and I have talked a little bit about Congress and politics. It's a worthless effort, but it was the end of the second year. We have 2-year terms. Well, the second year is all about re-election. Yeah. So nobody's doing anything in the second year. Right. If you're not getting, the first year is about learning how the ropes, and the second year is about re-election. So when's anything ever getting done? Anyway, so I thought, I'm going to go to Congress. This is going to be easy. Everybody's going to love this. And I can step back and just embrace it myself because it'll be everywhere and I know my son will be remembered. Well, that didn't happen. That bill died. So in 2010, I thought, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I thought I'm going to go and bring this message to everybody in the entire country. And I'm going to meet with as many people as I can, with as many veterans as I can, because I need that 10% to get to that 90%. Yeah. Right? That's the only way I'm going to get to the 90. So that's what I did. I actually traveled to every single state And I left that message everywhere I went. That's where I started meeting so many families. This was 14 years ago. And I thought, okay, so I've done that, right? I've got all this messaging out, and every state now knows about it. And at that time, I was looking for the states to embrace it as well. And I had 2 state adoptions, the state of Virginia, where I came from, and the state of Pennsylvania. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really cool. I got states to adopt this, right? And so federal government, they weren't doing anything. So I finished my trip at the end of 2010 on Veterans Day, and I thought, I'm going to Congress now. I had this book with me, Tim. I didn't bring it with me, but I have this book with pages of signatures from senators, from local representatives, from Gold Star family. Mostly I was looking for influential people, governors that would sign this book. I had Nikki Haley. I had met Ross Perot. I met Rick Perry. I mean, I was meeting all kinds of people out there, right? All giving me lip service. Well, individual stories
for our veteran.
Yeah. Well, whatever you want, whatever you need. What can I do for you? That's the key word. It's going to be put on my gravestone. What can I do for you? And so I did that, and I thought, I've got this book of names. I'm going to go to Congress now. In 2011, I'm going to get a new bill introduced, right? When I found a congressman, Thelma Drake was out, Randy Forbes was in. And so I got a new congressman. I'm gonna go to the halls of Congress. I'm a Gold Star dad. They're gonna listen to me. I'm gonna have my flag, and I'm gonna knock on every door. So for 2 months, I knocked on every door, literally 571 offices, and I was in every single one of them after 2 months.
Man, I applaud that effort. That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it's not what I do. It's who I am. At the end of that time, I had 157 co-sponsors on a bill, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be our national symbol of remembrance. About 6 months later, I get a call from the congressman that said, we're not ever going to get this through. It's going to be considered an earmark, and we're not going to get it through. So we think we could get a modified bill passed if we don't make it your flag, but we decide we're going to create a national symbol, but it may not be your flag. And I went, hold on a minute. Do you know what I've been doing to make every family realize that this is their flag, that when we fly it sends a message to them? I go, I'm not starting this over again with anything else. So I said, forget it. Forget the bill. I'm done with you. So for 9 years, I gave up on Congress. I decided that since I had 2 state adoptions, I was going to have the states put their money where their mouth is, right? Because if you think about it, Tim, yourself, any of our armed forces, wherever they live, they're not dying for their country. They are, but they're dying for their territory, right? They're dying for the place that they own. They're dying for where their family lives. And it's in the states. So I thought, surely the states are going to stand up and honor the individuals who lived in their communities, right? And so that became my effort. And I'm not a lobbying group. I have no lobbyists out there. I have Gold Star families and patriots and supporters who think this is important. So they'll go to their local Congress, their local, representative, their state senators, not their U.S. senators. And they'll say, hey, this is important. We want you to pass this. Make this a national symbol.
Right. Or
make this a state symbol. Well, I can tell you that to date, right now, I have 28 state adoptions. So 28 states, over half the country, has made this flag their state symbol of remembrance by legislation. So I thought a few years ago, I had 27 states. We just got Alaska, by the way, a couple of weeks, last month, which I was really excited about because that wasn't even on my radar. But what we started to do then is to go to these states, right? And I thought, well, if I have over half the country, states, Certainly I could go to Congress, and Congress will recognize that, well, over half, right? No, that didn't happen. So I've had 3 bills since I've had over half the country.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened. So just continuing to answer your question about my path. So then what do? One of the things that I have not discussed is the personalization of the flags.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
And then I probably should, because that's one of the ways of getting this word out there.
Yeah. And there's a lot of thought that went into it, as I understand. Every color, shape, symbol
We
has a
haven't
meaning.
even talked about that.
Yeah?
I know. We haven't even talked about that. And I'll do that quickly. When that flag was unveiled, it took a lot of thought. You're right. It took a lot of research. It took a lot of conversations and dialogue with individuals to try to find out what symbols would be meaningful. How would this be impactful? Because one thing I didn't want to do, and I'm sure that when you started Grunt Style, is that you didn't just want to be a schlocky organization. You wanted to come across professional. You wanted to come across in a way that everybody understood you were serious about what you were doing, right? This is the same way I went about it with this flag. And the Department of Heraldry, came back and said this was one of the most well-designed flags they'd ever seen.
Really?
So that's high praise, right? So I looked at symbols that had meaning, that had meaning to just the general population and to the military and to Gold Star families. And this is not a Gold Star flag. There is a Gold Star flag.
Yeah, that's federally recognized.
That's recognized. Well, it was chartered, back in World War I.
Yeah.
Right? The Gold Star banner. Right? We all know that. But there's a lot of controversy about that, and only the families can fly it anyway. It's not for the general consumption, right? So I looked at all this symbolism and I thought, okay, what's meaningful? Well, I knew about the Blue Star, I knew about the Gold Star. Certainly a folded flag. Everybody understands what a folded flag is and what it means. Although what I've come to find out in my halls of Congress journey was that folded to a Gold Star family, a folded flag means death.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just is automatic with us because it was handed to us.
Correct.
Right? But to the general population, a folded flag is the way it's folded.
Yeah.
It's just the way you fold the U.S. flag. So I could see a folded flag, encased on somebody's shelf and think, my immediate question is, who did you lose?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that flew over the Capitol, or that flew over this, or that flew that. It totally blows my mind because it's just totally incongruous to my thinking, because I lost my son and I was handed a folded flag.
Yeah.
It's not like, they fold it special that way when somebody dies. No.
Right.
And so all of these symbols, I collected to the point of even the words honor and remember, became very precious to me. And then getting with a design team and going, how can we put all these elements together so that it's meaningful and impactful, and that when you see it, you don't need a lot of explanation.
Right.
If you see this flag like in a parade, somebody's been lost. You got a folded flag and the words honor and remember. Somebody died.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so this became how I put those elements together to create what I think is a very beautiful and stark flag. I can see this flag miles away on a flagpole, and I know that's an honor and remember flag. Yeah. I've seen it on TV shows just in the background and go, they've got an honor and remember flag. It's just something that is so eye-catching and so revealing. And so beyond that, my wife said to me one day, because I said to her, how am I going to get this out there? How are we going to get people to know? I mean, I could get on a TV show. I mean, I could do there wasn't podcast back then, but I could do all kinds of things. But those things come and go. They're a flash in the pan. They're not repeated.
Right.
I need flags on flagpoles all over America to send this message to these families. She said, if you can figure out a way to personalize it, to make it personal for these families, then you're going to have an army out there of individuals who believe, rightly so, that they need to be continued to be remembered. I digress just for a second, but I was sitting in a Senate hearing with a Gold Star widow, and we were testifying in Michigan to try to get this passed in Michigan, which it still hasn't. But the senator looked at this widow and said, "Why do you need this flag?" And she looked right back at him and said, "I don't. You need this flag because I remember every day.
Right.
I don't need the reminder. You need to know about my husband's sacrifice."
Yeah.
And so it just so happened, I don't believe in coincidences, but it just so happened that the way that this flag was designed allowed it room right underneath of it to be personalized. And so I don't know where the camera is, but we can show this. So what we were able to do within 1 month actually of unveiling the flag nationally, was to come out with a personalized version of this flag. And so we made it our secondary and benevolent mission to gift, free of charge, a hand-sewn Honor and Remember flag to every single family who has ever lost a loved one in the history of our country.
Wow.
We're doing something that not every organizations have to be focused because they're finite. They're finite resources, they're finite, whatever that may be, funding, individuals, land space, whatever it is. But I wanted to make sure that anyone who had ever lost a loved one in our history could request an personalized Honor and Remember flag and it be gifted to them.
That's a sizable number. Something over like 500,000, correct?
It's a sizable number. I think it is over 500,000. And to date, we have presented over 5,000 flags.
Oh, wow.
Over 5,000 flags. And to every generation, Tim.
Yeah.
All the way back to the Revolution, actually. We presented flags, but mostly Vietnam, World War II, children from, the World War II, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. And here's an interesting part of this. It's not only to those that you would think would be killed in action, but this flag will represent those who died while serving in any capacity or as a result of serving.
Yeah. And I think that's where the conversation gets a little sideways in the national level, right? Is that, for those families that have lost somebody in service that is not combat related, it's now the parsing of hairs of who's Gold Star, what's Gold Star, right? And here it doesn't matter. And we're remembering everybody. Right?
Remembering service,
right? And the individual itself.
I will tell you, a lot get hung up on that definition, and I'm afraid. I'm sorry that they do, because I will tell you, at the end of the day, no matter what you do know or what you don't know, no matter how your loved one didn't come home, at the end of the day, they're not walking through that door.
Right.
And you can feel really proud of that or not proud of it or whatever, but you're not going to have that conversation. And it's a really difficult place for everybody. Yeah. That grief, those families that are in a hidden wounds situation, right? And don't have the answers of why, what happened, what do I do? Yeah. Are feeling the same loss as my son, who I would say happened to be shot, by a sniper. But I'm in a different position because he was, I can speak for so many.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It allows you to have a voice. But the voice, it's not any more powerful than, to the point of how the circumstance is, the totality of it all. Right.
Right.
That's incredible. One of the things I think about, right, and think broader, have you, I think about where in the country are flags prominently flown, right? In almost every location that would have some sort of family member that is probably touched by this or supporting of the idea. Like, have you gone to like the big hotel chains and saying, yes, exactly. I need you putting this flag up in your courtyard?
Exactly. You see, that is my mission. My mission is not to that 10%.
Yeah.
It's to that 90%. And who are those 90%? Corporate America, who has flagpoles.
Yeah.
This is why in Virginia, they fly it at all the rest stops in Virginia. They're flying it at the at Department of Motor Vehicles. They're flying at the VA cemeteries.
Yeah.
You know, these are where state adoptions help us influence those corporations in those states that to say, it's your state's symbol of remembrance.
Yeah.
You should put it up, because there are families that shop in your locations. There are families that drive into your car washes. There are families that utilize your products. And why not let them know that you are on board with remembering? Because face it, you know, Memorial Day, everybody rallies around Memorial Day. And I've done the research and realized that between 50 and 80% of Americans don't know why we have Memorial Day, right? But we're doing an effort, the biggest effort we can, the 10%, to make sure that there's some kind of noise going on around Memorial Day.
Right.
But what happens after that? Right? Those families...
It's Father's Day, so we quickly forget.
Those families, honestly, most of them are waiting for Memorial Day to be over.
Yeah.
Because it's a reminder how little we remember, right? So what do? Here's a chance to continue that messaging, not the somber, sad, because Memorial Day is more for the heroes that gave their lives, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's about death, remembering death. But let's remember to celebrate their lives. That's what this flag is about. It's a celebration of their lives. So let's continue the messaging. How do you do it? I mean, honestly, I'm asking America, how do you continue the messaging in a positive way? There's no way without something. This flag, I contend, is the way to continue that message in a positive way. Let those families know as they frequent your facility. Hey, I still remember. I may not know you, but I remember what sacrifice cost.
Yeah.
Because what I do, Tim, is I encourage the families that have been presented flags and even have not yet been presented flags, and there's hundreds on my waiting list, hundreds. I ask them to go in and find the manager or find the owner and tell your story.
Yeah.
You know, go in and thank them for flying that flag and tell them about your loved one and let them know why it's important. Because I will tell you, every time it makes an impact. Oh, I didn't know we even had someone in our area.
Yeah,
you know,
it's absolutely important. You know, I think something you said there, I took note of, and I wanted to circle back to really quickly. And we have a very similar perspective here at Grunstyle. You know, when we walk around the building, I'll show you a little bit of what I mean surrounding that. But we have a belief here at Memorial Day is. It should be a celebration, right? A celebration for many different reasons. One, celebrating the idea that there are still Americans willing to die for the idea of what this country represents. I think is foremost the most important ideal that we should be celebrating on that day. And then celebrating the lives of those that did give that, that moment in time, right? And that's it, right? Everything else is, it's beginning of summer, it's the barbecue, it's all that other things. Yeah, those are activities. But the big things that we are celebrating is the idea of Americanism, and and those that have given their life for that very idea. And I think that's important. We lose a lot of sight in that. We've become a very commercialized and consumer-centric country, economy, and I get it. That's fine. But doing stuff like what we do here at Grunstyle, we shut down our sales on Memorial Day. Like you can't purchase anything from the .com website, and we turn that into an education space. Right, to your point, like to the 92% of the people that flow through our website that have not a military experience, that day they're going to learn a little bit about what it means to give your life for something bigger than yourself. Yeah. Right, that sense of service and selflessness. That we like to I like to think that we live up to those ideals, right, as a business and individuals within the business. But I think it's important that we are sharing those ideals as opportunities that we all have that we can grow into, right? Because none of us are perfect, and we all make mistakes, and much like this country, there are in spite of all the things that this country has done, there are still people here willing to die for it, right? And I think that's that's as American as you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I do a follow-up?
Yeah.
If you don't mind. You were talking about getting to the hotel chains, because this is what I see, is I see everyone who has flagpoles, in this country, and it could be the fast food chains, the Wendy's, the McDonald's, it could be the hotel chains, it could be the Home Depots, the Lowe's, the Chick-fil-A's. I mean, all of those areas, cemeteries, golf courses, any place that has flags. We've got a beautiful golf pin flag, that can be used on military tournaments. I mean, but all of those, one of the areas where we started, where I think that we have had the most embracing and support, has been the NASCAR community.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you have seen, but NASCAR, we partnered with back 12 years ago. And now NASCAR has got to the point where they put fallen service members' names on the cars, during the Memorial Weekend.
Yeah.
And they stop the race, which has never happened in the history of NASCAR. They literally stopped the race in the middle, took all the cars off the track, turned off their engines, rolled out the biggest honor remember flag you could ever see, 100 by 60 feet, and had a 30-second moment of silence.
Yeah.
That's eyeballs. That's 90%.
Yeah.
That's millions of people who, what's going on? Seeing this symbol, associating it with a moment of silence on that weekend. And so that, if we can duplicate that, and they're going to start doing this at tracks all on their whole platform, not just Memorial Day. We were talking about, how do you do it beyond the 365? Well, that's one way you do it. I've been starting to talk with the United National Soccer League. We've got inroads into the NFL. I mean, if we could start making this a common part of tradition, and people will see it and be exposed to it, the more that the more they have the opportunity to embrace it, the more it will permeate into that 90%.
Yeah.
And I believe, as passionate as I can, I believe that with partnering with organizations like your own, that we could raise the level of patriotism in this country.
I think so. I think Grunt Style is one of our missions is to be a household name, right? To be a brand that's being communicated at the dinner table of things that are beyond that center really around pride, self-pride, military pride, and country, right? And that's super important, because as it goes, right? We see the turmoil in the country, right, and the division, the divisiveness that is showing its ugly head. We have the ability to change that, right? And it's just by knowing that my neighbors are not trying to hurt me. My neighbors aren't my enemies, right? They're people that have children, that have jobs, that have all these things, and they're struggling like me,
right,
and like everybody else,
right?
These are just common things. We have a responsibility, right, to our country. That patriotism is something that we can criticize our country all we like, right? And that's the beauty of being American, and it's part of our responsibility as well. But also part of that responsibility is being involved in the politic, and being involved in patriotism, and being involved as an American in your neighborhood. And I feel very firm about that, right? Because that's the America I grew up in. I'm only 46 years old, right?
I'm 71.
And your version of America is a little bit different than mine, right?
Yeah.
And, as we are, continuing to have conversations like this, is how do we bring, a larger community into these conversations? It's things like this, right? These are the unifying moments that we can all get behind, right? We could all, go to honorremember.org and get a flag and maybe walk it over to the McDonald's and be like, hey, would you ever think about flying this on that flagpole out there? Because I know Grunt Style has got a 30-foot flagpole, and I want to have this up on that flagpole as well. So, I think everybody can do that, and it's just a small token, and it goes to Even if you're a small business owner, right, and you're listening to this podcast, or you're the manager at the McDonald's, or you work at the Holiday Inn or wherever,
or you own the Holiday Inn
franchise, right? Put one of these flags on your property, right? Be the one that takes that initiative, because I guarantee you, as you have mentioned, that there will be somebody that walks into the organization and says, you know what, I saw that flag, thank you,
right?
Thank you, right? And that's Americans want to say thank you. We see it all the time as,
Exactly.
Thank you for your service. Yeah, and I say it gobsmackingly in a way, sometimes, like, we've gotten to the habit of saying thank you for your service as we step over your homeless, situation.
Right.
We could do a better job there. But, all in all, right, the Americans have, embraced it, in contrary to the sins of the Vietnam era, right? They don't ever, it seems like Americans don't ever want to embrace that aspect of.
Well, they care about their own community, right? Anyway, so even if they are walking over the homeless, God forbid, but their neighbor, their next door neighbor, these are the typical Americans that are losing their lives. They're right next to you, right? So if nothing else, think about a community within your own church. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, Tim, I've spoken in a group, and I've asked people to stand up if they've lost someone in military service, regardless of generation. And the amount of people that have stood up in a room that people don't even know. Yeah. And we could be saying thank you. I mean, say church, but churches could be flying this. Let me give you I give you a short vision of what I see. For families, and maybe this will hit home with the people that are out there that don't realize the impact of what this flag means for someone to have seen it. I fly one in my yard, okay, obviously. When I leave my driveway and I go right, at the end of my street, a mile away, my neighbor has got 2 flags in his yard, little yard flags. That's one of what blesses me. He's had them there for years. I take a right. I go to the end of that, where my next turn is, there's a VFW. The VFW is flying the Honor and Remember flag. Under the POW flag, under the American flag. And I'm blessed. Happens to be a Gold Star dad who's a member there, but it doesn't matter because of many posts around the country. I keep going straight down that road. There's a Ruritan Club, one of the social, like a Lions Club, and they're flying a flag there. I go 5 miles straight on that same road. There's an American Legion, the oldest American Legion post in Virginia. They're flying the Honor and Remember flag, under the POW flag and under the American flag. I turn right there. This is God's honest, just the way it is. I turn right there. I go 2 more miles. There's a church on the corner of one of the busiest intersections, flying an Honor and Remember flag. Yeah. And I could go around the geography there and point out more flags. At the airport, when I left, they're flying the Honor and Remember flag. Yeah. This is my vision for America. This is my gift to every Gold Star family, regardless of whether you define yourself as a fallen, next of kin or however that works out. If your loved one died while serving or as a result of serving, this flag's out there for you. I want every family in America to have that same vision of flags when they go about their day, every single day, to be reminded not only that their loved one was taken far too early, but that they themselves are remembered for the sacrifice that they give every day. Yeah. That's the power of this flag.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it. I've passed a few on my travels, and it's. I think the last one I saw was in Virginia at a hotel, actually. That's I was like, must be really beating the ground there. But I think anybody can. Anybody can get involved, right? You have honorremember.org is a website if you want to learn more about the organization, and I'm sure you're doing activations that people can volunteer all the time.
We have a lot of things going on. If just going to your state, we have a legislative page. If your state is not one of those adoptive states, go to a legislator and ask them if they would introduce that legislation in there. I know if we could get all 50 states, We'll eventually get it through Congress.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see it in all 50 states.
Yeah.
So as you said, if you see a flagpole, I've encouraged, the volunteers and supporters that we have. If you see a prominent flagpole, go in there and share about the flag. Tell them the story and what it means, and see if they'll put it up.
Yeah.
And let's get flag as you mentioned earlier. But you might have a flagpole in your business, in your church or whatever. But those are the kinds of activations that really will help us. And then we've got, I say, hundreds of flags requests from families who have wanted a personalized flag, hundreds. And we can't get to them all.
Yeah.
So we need funding for that. The sponsorship for one of these flags is around $500. These are hand-sewn heirloom quality flags. They're gifted personally, right? They're not sent in a box to somebody.
It's not the one you're gonna fly outside your house.
Not one you're gonna fly outside your house unless it's a special day, it's a birthday or death anniversary or a special reminder day. But this is an heirloom quality flag. And Tim, we haven't even put the word out there. I mean, probably through this podcast, we'll get even more requests.
Yeah. Well, one of you're talking about activations and the opportunity of raising money. One of the ways that people can help is through the Grunt Style Limited product. We have a T-shirt that is designed specifically for this initiative and an awareness campaign for you guys. Tell us a little bit about the shirt itself.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. You can see it on the screen. It's a shirt that has the Honor Remember logo on the front of it, emblazoned with our red bar with the words Honor Remember. And on the back, it says, individually, we remember a few. Together, we remember them all. Yeah. So I remembered early. I was talking to you earlier about all the one-offs that families are doing. To me, that is an individual effort. Everybody is trying to remember a certain event, right? The Afghanistan 13, where we have to remember that event. The Navy SEALs that went down in the helicopter, the 31. That's an event. The Red Horse. There's so many events that we're remembering individually, but with the Honor Remember flag, collectively, we can pull them all in the net. And we can remember every single one, everyone that died every single day. Yeah. And we'll continue to lose their lives.
It's a big tent opportunity.
It is.
Absolutely. And I love it. I think that what you're doing is fantastic. I appreciate the discipline and the years of trying to get where you are to where you are today, of trying to get this and a more awareness and broadly accepted across the United States, and the determination to do that is awesome. Yeah. I tip my hat to you, good sir. And we got some cool things that we potentially working on here that will help continue to broaden the message and get more people understanding exactly what this campaign is all about, and what your vision is of the Honor and Remember campaign, and the putting a flag on every flagpole in America. What would you leave the community with?
Yeah, that's exactly the right message. Remember that someone sacrificed their life so that you and yours didn't have to, and be thankful. And by raising this flag, displaying it in any way possible, what you're doing is sending a message to every single family in America that has made that sacrifice. Absolutely. That you haven't forgotten.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for the opportunity. This is amazing.
Absolutely.
Look forward to it.
I always, one thing I love about American Grit is just getting to meet interesting people that are doing passionate things, right, all across the United States. Yeah. And I've come across some very interesting folks, and you're certainly one of them in, the perseverance and the ability to stand up in face of all the things that would stop a normal person. You have persevered, sir, and that is commendable.
If I could mention one thing, by the time of this broadcast, I'm in the process of writing a book about this adventure. It's called Tragedy to Tribute, and that's something that's going to come out, I hope, by the end of the year. So it will also tell the journey in much more detail of what it's become and how so many people are behind it.
We'll have to have you back when that book comes out. Very good. Well, George, I want to say thank you, and I want to say thank you to everybody that is listening to this program. If you want to know more about Honor and Remember, go to honorandremember.org. And, again, if you see a flagpole that is vacant, stop in, have a conversation with those people, point them to honorandremember.org, and get them to get involved in getting a flag and raising it up on that flagpole. I think it is a mission worthy of all of us to be a part of. And, there's other opportunities as well, right? Get involved with the GSL. You heard it from George, about $500 to make one of these hand-sewn flags that are presented to families of the fallen all across America. There's well over 500,000 of these families, and he's serviced over 5,000 of them so far. That is a big mission, and we all can help. And I think, by contributing to a GSL and sharing this within your community, you can do that from the comfort of your very own home or on the other side of that device. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I want to say thank you for another episode of American Grit and listening, and we'll see you again next time. George, I want to say thank you for all your efforts and continue to do great things out there, and we will be supporting you and watching along the way, and we are very excited for your GSL. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, you know the drill. Be kind to one another and wash those stinking hands. See you soon.